The session resumes. Our next speaker is Mr. Alexander Vavilov. He is a professor at the Department of Diplomatic and Consular Service at the Diplomatic Academy in Moscow. Mr. Vavilov has authored various books, articles, and publications. Among the topics of his publication are U.S. relations with the Middle East and North Africa, as well as a modern politics and economics of the Arab countries. We are very glad to have you joining us today, and you have now the floor, sir.
Thank you, dear friends. This is not a mistake when I say my friends to you, because we are all here friends of peace in the Middle East. In this long-suffering region, without exaggeration, this is a martyr region. Many speakers have presented very interesting data, very interesting impressions, very interesting ideas, and this facilitates my task to a large extent, because people who have gathered here are people who know a lot, people who follow attentively in practice the events, and people who take close to heart this problem. And speaking in front of you is, of course, a great honor and pleasure for me, but on the other hand, this is a rather difficult task, since talking about things that everybody knows, and probably knows more than I do myself, it is a very difficult task in this sophisticated audience. Let us start, first of all. I hope that you share my feelings. I think that we should thank the initiators of this meeting, because, of course, this is a very timely event. If you take Russian media today and yesterday, the media contain a lot of material in connection with our today's meeting, describing the statements, positions, and so on. And you could see yourself how many people there were in the hall and how many interviews we have given. We have heard here a very correct idea, in my opinion. I mean that we witness a rather unorthodox event in international politics. That is a conflict which continues forever, because only the hot stages of the conflict, I mean hot stages from 1947, but the conflict itself had started at the end of the one but lost century, when the book by Theodor Herzl was published, The Jewish State. And it is in that book that the principle was laid out, which continues to mar the relationships today. The principle which does not correspond to reality. It was said, people without land and land without people. How can it be without people? And what about the people who lived there for centuries, who lived there in the Holy Land? Are they not people? And up to now, The conflict continues, and I want to draw your attention to the tragedy of the conflict. It contains in the fact that with this sad repetition, every 10 years you have an explosion. 48, 56, 67. That's quite correct, you're saying. 73, 82. Every 10 years we have an explosion. Last year, the entire mankind was frightened, and my colleagues and friends here spoke here and described what happened in Gaza. Over 2,000 victims, children, infants. This is just plain massacre. 51,000 buildings destroyed. 51,000. And who is going to restore it? Well, the representatives of the United Nations can describe better than myself how much effort one must make to find a single penny for restoration work. Every second person in Gaza wants to leave and look for better life abroad. And what kind of life is that? This is the life, first of all, in the rows of the Islamic State. And this is the direct consequence of the conflict, a direct consequence. There is no other consequence. If you watch the propaganda materials of the Islamic State, there's a direct indication that we stand for the fight against the enemies of Islam. And today, this problem is not a regional one, and not so much a regional one. It's rather a global one. Just look around. This year, the growth of migrants to Europe from North Africa, from the Middle East, is double that of last year. So they want to close the borders to solve the problem. But how you can solve it? This is a common human problem, and which is impossible to solve. Well, everybody remembers the January massacre at Charlie Hebdo. This is also a direct reflection of the Middle East conflict. The Arab Spring is the same, and everything else. Therefore, today, we, of course, this is not an exaggeration, even if I look at the audience here, I see that the international community is represented here quite well. And we need to deal with this problem today. Moreover, we have to make joint efforts. It was very well said here, and I do not have to dwell on the details because you know that it was said here that the Americans at a certain point tried to monopolize this process, but nothing came out of it. They recognize it. Last year, Kerry visited the Middle East 11 times, but got nothing. Why? Because today we have to solve this kind of problems together, to join all our efforts to solve the problem. And there is one very serious danger here. Well, hoping that time will cure the problem, we cannot do this in this case. I remember late 1970s and the discussion between the legendary leader of the Palestinians, Yasser Arafat, with our leader at that time, Brezhnev, in the Kremlin. He said directly, Comrade Brezhnev, tell the Israelis, and that was late 1970s, tell the Israelis if they want peace, let them negotiate now, because later people will come with whom it will be impossible to reach agreement. So that was a prophecy, and exactly this happened. Radicalization, extremism, which is not prone to negotiations, you cannot agree with them. They have completely different attitudes. And for the global diplomacy, for the United Nations, this is the area which, the one where you have to work, make efforts. I support my colleagues who spoke here, that of course this is the role of the quartet. It is important, and the role of the regional organizations is also important. That's quite correct. But today, dear colleagues, I'm dealing with the US policies for over half a century. To expect anything from the Americans, expect any initiatives or steps, there's no point in expecting that or hope for that. Why? Because Obama is a lame duck already. He's only interested to stay in history without any conflicts, without any specific actions, just to sit in his chair for this year, for the remaining year, and that's it. Because here our common effort, our common work is very important. We have nobody to hope for. We can get a much more complex picture if we continue to wait. And in this sense, new difficulties appear. We can reach agreements at the level of states, at the level of official actors, and so on. But what should we do with the Islamic State? Agreeing with them, that is a difficult task. They have got half of Syria, half of Iraq. And here I completely support the position presented here that right now, without losing any more time, we have to seek the resumption of the negotiation process. Yes, this is difficult because too much time has passed and too much blood was shed. And you know very well that conflicts based on blood are the most difficult ones to solve. Well, the latest Gaza war last year left scars in the hearts of the people. That's very difficult, but there's no other choice because a military alternative is impossible here. And as my distinguished colleague pointed out here, they understand that very well in Israel, and they understand it quite well as the representative of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. They understand that in the Islamic world. The main goal right now is to place them at the negotiating table, to start the negotiating process, be it in the framework of the quartet or in the enforced quartet, including Arab elements, or in the framework of an international conference. But a negotiating process that is marking time, which is blocked, we need to unblock it. And here the role and the influence of the United Nations is extremely important. Moreover, we speak at all the forums that we should forget our own self-interests. When those terrorists are good, why? Because they support our interests, and those terrorists are bad, and therefore we're going to punish them and bomb, create coalitions, and so on. No. We need a different approach. We need to join all the efforts and understand that this is the threat to everybody. The Americans at present have not yet received the wave of terrorism, but they will get it. I'm sure of that. It is present in Europe, and they will get to the US. And I think that the main task now is to resume the negotiating process so that the parties discuss things at the negotiating table rather than using machine guns and seek for solutions. There is no other alternative. I would like to once again thank the hosts and organizers of this meeting, because I think that it will make its contribution. It will be a noticeable cornerstone in the negotiating process. We are following the correct direction, and I hope we will achieve the most important thing. We will try to heal the wound unprecedented as a result of the conflict which continues for over a century. And unless we remove this conflict at once, well, of course we have to be realistic, but at least we should try to subdue its acuteness. It was quite correctly said here that we should not manage the conflict. The conflict has to be settled. So, in conclusion, I would like to, first of all, thank all of you for your interest and for your participation, for your efforts, especially representatives of the countries which directly participate in this standoff, and I would like to wish all of us future success. Thank you.
I would like to thank Mr. Vavilov for joining us today and for his presentation, and for your assessment of the situation and call for international action is most welcome. We can now start our discussions. Participants are welcome to ask questions or make comments on the presentations we have had. We shall take a few comments and questions from the audience at one time. Then the speakers will be given an opportunity to respond. And we shall continue like this, I guess, until the last question or comment has been raised. Please request the floor, identify yourself, and please just introduce yourself as you make your brief comments or pose questions. The floor is open. gentleman over there. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Elio Tamburi, and I work in the Division for Palestinian Rights in the UN Secretariat. First of all, thank you for all the panelists who have demonstrated extreme knowledge and in the subject matter. I have one question in relation to the implementation of the Arab Peace Initiative. It was mentioned yesterday by another panelist that there was a suggestion that the Arab Peace Initiative could be implemented in phases, and perhaps it would be difficult to implement all the initiative at once. I just wanted to know if this is a possibility in the view of the panelists, in particular perhaps on the OIC, and also in light of the other comments that Ms. Shayanska made, that there is little knowledge in Israel about this initiative. What else could be done to promote this initiative among public opinion in Israel and throughout the Middle East and indeed in the world? Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Yes, ma'am.
Здрасте. Посол Боливии Мария Луиса Рамос.
Maria Villa Ramos, Ambassador of Bolivia. Maybe I'm a bit naive in asking what I'm going to ask, but probably some of you will be interested in taking up the question. Aren't we a kind of hostage to the resolutions of the Security Council? I mean, to the expected resolutions of the Security Council. We expect some action from them, but until they act, we kind of hang in a limbo. Using this opportunity, I would like to express my solidarity, by the way, with the struggle and the cause of the Palestinian people. Bolivia is a strong supporter of the Palestinian cause and strongly condemns the colonial policy of the Israeli authorities on their territories. Thank you.
Question? Yes, sir.
My name is Makaremi Bisono. I'm the Special Rapporteur on OPT. Since my assumption of my mandate, I observe that there is a deterioration of situation of human rights in the occupied Palestinian territories. So I observe that there is a relation between the situation in the ground with the prospect of peace process. So I am very pleased to hear from the Senator of France that the French initiated to do something on bridging the problems of peace process. So I just want to know, because the more uncertainties is there, the more situations in the ground is suffering for the Palestinians. So do you have a time frame in your proposal to be submitted in Security Council on the withdrawal of the Israeli force from the occupied Palestinian territories? You know? So what's actually your draft proposal to Security Council with regard to the incentive for Israelis to engage on the peace process? Because we do need two to tangos. You know, if this Arab only are interested to engage in the negotiation while the Israeli is not interested, you know, how can we do it? You know, so thank you. Maybe all of you can, you know, share with us what will be the prospect of it.
Thank you for your question. We have got 3 questions on the floor now. Shall we deal with those for now while the participants are thinking about the next questions and comments. Can I just take it from, yes, sir, you were directed a question in terms of the time frame.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think we have already passed through 30 years, let's say from 2002 until now, the Arab Peace Initiative on the table. And through this period, there has been a lot of developments, attempts, the roadmap, the implementation of the roadmap, and the last efforts of Mr. Kerry. You know why the negotiations stopped? Because the Israelis refused to release the fourth batch of the prisoners. So when we are talking about stages, already we have come through all these stages. The Oslo agreements was supposed to be for 5 years. Then the full withdrawal of the Israeli forces from the occupied territories and expected Palestinian state to be established in 1999. Now to come again and to talk about a longer process of stages, putting the Arab peace on stages, I think this is unfair. The Palestinians had enough of suffering, enough of facing the occupation. The Palestinian Authority was established in 1994. I think we have passed all through the necessary or unnecessary long occupation. So what is required now is the international community is to put pressure on Israel to implement what has been agreed upon. The outcome of the implementation of the Arab Peace Initiative, as the Arabs already, many of them, they have, during the period from 1993 till 2000, many of the Arab states established relations with Israel. Many of the Islamic states established relations with Israel. I think now the international community has to stand and question why the Arab Peace Initiative or the roadmap or who has not fulfilled their commitments. So it's important that the international community at this stage not to talk about any stages or any programs. What I agree with the efforts which was to set a time limit to end the occupation, the efforts of France also in this regard, no more time to put any stages for the future negotiations. And in return, not only the Arab countries, 57 countries of OIC are ready to recognize Israel, to establish normal relations with Israel. If we reach to the end of occupation, the establishment of the Palestinian state, independent Palestinian state on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as capital. And this is also in line with the General Assembly resolution in 2012. I think we have enough resolutions, we have enough efforts made in the past years. What we need the implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yep, ma'am, there was a question.
Sorry, yeah. Thank you for your question. You know, in 2004, maybe 2005, I don't remember exactly, Jordan ambassador, and Jordan side actually, I think by the initiative of King Abdallah, they decided to promote Arab Peace Initiative in Israel. They invited the leading leftist academics, and some of peace NGOs person, and Ron Pundak was there, and others. We had first the consultations, Israeli-Jordanian, and then it was a big meeting in Aqaba, I think in Aqaba, where there was a big gathering, trilateral meeting between Palestinians, Israeli and Jordanians. We came to some conclusions. It was a steering committee to promote this initiative. Some steps were implemented. One of them was to publish the Arab Peace Initiative in Hebrew and to put it as an attachment or edition to weekly, weekend newspapers, newspapers, and it was done. Yeah, since that time, 10 years or even more already, and people don't remember, don't know what goes on from the governmental officials, that there is nobody to talk, and people also see what's going on around. The Islamic State, as you mentioned, the Syria in the war, and the same Netanyahu is saying there is nobody to talk to. But we know that they want to talk. We know that there are some countries, and they even have a hope maybe to contact the Arab countries and not to make peace with Palestinians, which is really funny. So it should come back a very aggressive, I would say, promotional oriented on the Arab Peace Initiative, mobilization of press and peace NGOs to let people hear about this, let people know about this. And as I mentioned, and maybe even on the level of, not on governmental level, but maybe on the level of peace NGO, during one of the conference, someone from Arab countries, and some of them we do have some kind of relations, yeah? And I'm not talking about Jordan and Egypt, I'm talking about Emirates, I'm talking about Saudi Arabia, may come and speak to Israeli people. So they just fear of everything, so it's very difficult. But it should be promoted, yeah.
Thank you. Any? I think the issue of the process being kept hostage in terms of resolutions that has been passed and never been implemented, would there be any response to that as to what are the efforts that can be put into the process in order to make sure that these resolutions have been implemented? With that in mind, can I invite the representative from Jordan to take the floor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to comment on the last question concerning why, as you put it, why do we remain hostages without any movement forward? And as the lady said, she mentioned Jordanian diplomacy led by His Majesty the King, which focused always on reminding everyone of the importance of achieving a productive peace that achieves the desired goals, primarily the establishment of the Palestinian state according to the accepted parameters and standards. I would like to add one point, that what we are really lacking, if we were to be frank about it, is a belief in peace, and a political will to achieve peace, and the political courage to achieve peace. If we looked at the picture among the concerned parties, we find that unfortunately these three elements were lacking within the Israeli leadership at various stages. There must be a conviction in those points, and we cannot expect to achieve any results even if all the points mentioned yesterday and today were implemented concerning a role for the Security Council, because one cannot drag a leadership to peace. That leadership must proceed based on its own conviction in peace and the future of the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Well, there was also this question about the attempts for the French resolution in terms of the time frame. Could we shed more light on that, Mr. Roger?
Oui. Actuellement, le ministre des Affaires étrangères français, M. Fabius, a fait le tour des capitales, Égypte, Jordanie, il était en Israël, il est allé en Palestine, et il a eu des contacts avec la Ligue arabe, l'Arabie saoudite et le Qatar.
Ну, в настоящий момент я должен сказать, что министр иностранных дел Франции Лоран Фабиус был в различных государствах.
Now, as I was saying, our foreign minister has made a tour of the Middle East. He met with the leaders in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia, in the headquarters of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. To repeat what I have already said this morning, we must achieve another framework, Quartet Plus, which means a quartet, the traditional quartet, plus representatives of Arab organizations and regional actors. Speaking about deadlines or a calendar of events, we as usual are in a very unfortunate period of time ahead of the American elections. However, I do believe that we could pursue the process should we have the support of the United States, of the Russian Federation, and the European Union to establish a new framework of the quartet that would support and facilitate the international conference. Today we are close to a transition to a new historical reality, the reality of an Islamic State. This advancing reality is a huge disabling factor for the whole region, engaging the entire region and beyond. I am sure that Israel simply cannot consider itself as an island in a sea of in an ocean of storm. It simply cannot ensure total security of its borders in this coming situation.
Chair doesn't want to steal the show, but I think the chair can also play the role of a mediator. Madam Prozorova, I think there was a discussion, and you have mentioned the issue of the possibility, and Mr. Roger has touched on that one slightly, of enlarging the quartet. Is there a possibility of enlarging this quartet, for example, by inviting the participants in the Arab Initiative? You have spoken about India, China, as a possibility of getting them into. With that in mind, and we have also heard mention of the Americans keeping the process hostage because they seem to be the initiators of the process, and when they don't initiate anything, nothing seems to be happening. What is that we can do to allow the process to continue, and especially by enlarging the idea of enlarging the quartet? Madam, you have got the floor.
Ну, вы знаете, здесь, конечно, нужно спрашивать.
I believe the heads of the diplomatic offices should provide an answer. I believe this is a diplomatic challenge in the true sense of the word. Of course, simply expanding the membership of the quartet ad infinitum is pointless. I think this will simply be a recipe for disaster. We need a balanced formula. We need a workable solution. We need a solution that would lead us to a consensus. This is a very fine job. Now, there is an opinion that international mediation is good in virtue of some sort of diplomatic channels that could be opened to obviate the direct contacts between the conflicting parties. Well, in a way, this is true, and indeed, the Russian Federation, for one, is promoting actively ties with all sorts of regional actors, including the Islamic Organization of Cooperation. On the other hand, there must be a will. A mediator in any process also carries a risk, a reputational risk. A mediator has to be effective, otherwise he would be simply a bad mediator. Before someone agrees to be a mediator, the mediator has to have a commitment from the requesting parties. Now, this means that regional actors, be it collective or individual, would have to provide a commitment. We don't have any particular ideas of the membership as yet. Probably the nearest future will tell us something about it in more detail. I would like to follow up on the Jordanian comment here. Now, yesterday we have had commitments about commitments to the process. We have also heard lamentations about the lack of political will everywhere. Now, personally, I would like to see both in Israel and Palestine a brand of politicians that may be called state persons, state builders in the purest sense of the word. Because state building is the way forward. And whoever leads these two entities, Israel and Palestine, must be state builders, must be statesmen. Now remember, Mr. Peres issued a book of memoirs where he offered his vision of common cooperation and this sorts. I think he told everything that had to be said about the benefits of cooperation and the peaceful process. This is just an imperative. One may only wonder why, given this understanding, there's no movement forward. I believe the reason is that the political establishment is simply not up to the challenge.
I could add something, but I think the question was more directed to Mr. Vavilov, and I think Madame Prozorova, indicated that this is needs a diplomatic solution, and he is the diplomatic expert. But if you have got something to add before Mr. Vavilov. Mr. Vavilov.
Let's see diplomat.
Well, whoever comes first. Yes.
Just really one sentence to answer the Jordanian ambassador. First of all, thank you for your comment, and I think I agree with you. It depends on the leader, but you know we have once in 2 years elections in Israel, and people vote. And if you prevent people or don't let them vote by their fears, and you can fight their fears before they vote, so then we can change the leader. Maybe I agree with Galina that we don't have leaders, maybe from both sides, who has such a vision and who don't think about their permanent chair position. But I think it's not only a place of leader in history, it's also people who vote for this leader. Thank you.
Mr. Vavilov.
Что касается роли дипломатии,
As to the role of diplomats, somebody was referring to this here. Well, diplomats can do a lot. That's why we are diplomats. That's what we exist for, to work a lot. And let us not forget, dear friends, that thanks to the work of the diplomats that has been going on for many, many years, we already have a legal basis, many laws and legal tools that we can use as a platform to seek new solutions. And I don't believe that we should ignore these things. We should not start from scratch, and we should not claim that we're starting from scratch. There are arrangements. We should abide by these arrangements, and I believe that this is a normal thing. You know that the Roman law said pacta sunt servanda. Agreements should be implemented. And if you go beyond arrangements or agreements, well, either you should have good arguments or you will just go beyond the political process. And I believe that this is what politics is about. It's about implementing agreements, treaties, and so on. So I believe that we were right when we believe that the members of the quartet should work more actively on the one hand, and on the other, I believe that my colleagues were correct here too. I believe that without bringing in countries or personalities who have a lot of influence on the participants, on the parties in the conflict, we can hardly expect anything to come out of it. Well, for example, let's take the Syrian settlement. There were two conferences. Neither Tehran nor Riyadh were invited to any one of them. Well, Tehran is one of the participants in this conflict. Saudi Arabia could do a lot to resolve that conflict too. So that's why we're saying that we must bring in any actors that can have an influence on the parties. And of course, we should seek compromise. We should not claim that we should start from scratch without any preconditions. No, I believe that this would be wrong, because we have done a lot, we have achieved a lot. I'm talking not about years, but about decades. Madrid arrangements, other conferences have taken place already, and why don't we use what we have already in terms of experience? And many people have recognized the usefulness of our work. That's what I think. Thank you.
Mr. Vavilov, I didn't see any. Oh, there are two requests from the floor. Or is it the same delegation? Yes, Morocco, you have got the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. J'ai une question au sénateur français et un petit commentaire. La question, c'est que, comme il vient de le souligner, Monsieur Laurent Fabius a pratiquement étalé en Israël, au Caire, en Palestine, pour promouvoir un projet de résolution.
Excuse me, Morocco, there seem to be no French.
No French, because
could you turn to Arabic, if that is possible, or
yeah,
English?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I have one question to the French senator and one comment, a brief comment. Mr. Senator said that Mr. Laurent Fabius, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, promoted the sort of draft resolution. He was in Cairo, in Palestine, and in Israel. But what we heard before, that this draft resolution indicated directly about the possibility of the two states. Now we heard that we go to negotiation, etc. And of course, it's very important to go to the negotiation and to have a resolution collectively voted by the Security Council. But I think we will have the same, and we will be in the same circle. So negotiation, as Italians said, basta. We should have something clear and commitment very firm. And with the duration of negotiation, etc. But I think I want to ask the French senator why this change. We know that there are a lot of difficulties, and to convince some other members of the Security Council. And I want to know exactly what is the position of the Russian Federation about this initiative, French initiative, if someone can inform us about this. The comment I want to make is about the quartet. The quartet, I think we can reform it, etc. But without giving this quartet the full attribution, full responsibility to promote a solution of two states, I think we can also turn around and to be in the same circle. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Morocco. Mr. Roger.
Oui. Merci pour cette question qui est bien évidemment difficile. Alors, moi, je ne suis pas le gouvernement français, mais le Parlement. Je sais, par la Commission des Affaires étrangères, de la Défense et des Forces armées.
Thank you very much for this question, but, well, it's a very difficult question for me because I do not represent the government of France, but the parliament of my country. And as far as I know, well, there is a committee on defense in France, and some people from this committee have told me that our government is trying to get Morocco, your country, involved in the adoption of this resolution. And if we successfully adopt this resolution at the UN, the French government, as encouraged by both houses of the French parliament, will immediately recognize the Palestinian state. And if such a resolution will not be adopted at the Security Council, we will have to go to some other countries, work with Russia, among others. When I was talking about bringing more countries into the quartet, I was talking about Quartet Plus. I used a verb in French that means not only to accompany, but to bring Israel and Palestine into some kind of an arrangement, a framework arrangement. I hope I have responded to your question.
We're running into red areas. Madam Prozorova, you want to add something quickly?
Well, there was a question about the possible position of Russia, and I will not start this guesswork. Well, I know that Russia does support this two-state solution, but I believe that I should read the draft resolution first to tell you. And, well, first of all, of course, I'm not responsible for our government and our Ministry of Foreign Affairs officially, but at least to make some assumptions, I have to look at the text of such a resolution, and we do recognize, Russia, I mean, the Palestinian state.
Thank you very much. There being no other comments or questions, and knowing that we are running into the extra time with the interpreters that have already been a bit patient with us, we would just thank them at this time and juncture. This concludes our plenary 2 deliberations. On behalf of the committee, I would like to express our deep appreciation to the distinguished experts and all our participants for the valuable deliberations that we had on this very important issue. Before I adjourn this session, I would like to remind you that we shall start plenary 3 at 3 o'clock in this room. I would like to appeal to all distinguished participants to make an effort to be here right on time so that we can start on time and I wouldn't have been seen to encroach upon the next session that will be chaired by Ambassador Perkaya from Indonesia. We will therefore start at 3 o'clock sharp. Let me once again thank our speakers and thank you for your participation until this time.